So I woke up this morning to news of issues with food security in the UK. Issues in Morocco and Spain have caused a knock-on effect, and also the rising energy prices in the UK have stopped a lot of farmers from using their greenhouses through the winter. That normally produces out-of-season crops for us here in the UK. So it got me thinking, what can we as individuals do to become a little bit more self-sufficient? What do you want to grow? What do you like to eat? How much of this produce could you reasonably use? Or is it something that you want bulk of and you can store or use in a variety of different ways? All these questions need to be asked first. You need to decide what you want to do. The next question is, how much space to grow those foods that you want to grow? Do you have a small balcony in a block of flats? Do you have a garden, an allotment, a small piece of land? All this will have an impact on what you want to grow. How big that item actually grows. There is some plants and vegetables that grow very, very big, so you have to be aware of this and do your research. How much of it would you actually need? Is it something that is an ingredient to something else, like onions or tomatoes? Or is it something that you would only need small amounts of at a time? Again, this is something you need to think about. Now, most people will not have the amount of space that you need to be self-sufficient. It's just not going to happen. But we can be clever. We can turn our spaces using planters, pots, bags, sacks, all manner of items, even buckets and tubs and bathtubs, into viable growing areas. Even seen people use hanging baskets for their strawberries and peas and even tomatoes. If you have access to a polytunnel or a greenhouse, this greatly benefits to be able to grow out of the season. Cold frame or windowsill, again, there's a lot of stuff we can actually grow on a very sunny windowsill. You've got chilies, even tomato plants you can grow indoors in your home. I've seen it myself. I've seen people growing tomato plants on their windowsill through the year. Choose a cherry variety, something compact, you'll have fresh tomatoes. In general though, if you don't have access or have the space on your windowsill or a polytunnel or a greenhouse, you will have to make sure you're growing to the seasons. Again, research. Research what you want to grow. Best times to plant for our season, when they're going to harvest, and how long they last for. Do you want to grow for the volume of produce or because that item is so expensive in the supermarket? Examples of raspberries and blueberries, both of which are very expensive in the shops for what you get. You can easily grow in your space. Blueberries you can put into a pot with ericaceous soil and pop it on your patio if you have the room for it. This will give you yearly abundance of blueberries. When it comes to seeds, seed packets in general are quite cheap, depending on what you want. But there is some basic varieties that you can buy from as little as 50p each. Potatoes can be grown in pots, bags, tubs, anywhere that you've got the space to grow potatoes. Now, different varieties will give you different yields, but in general, if you've got space for a few black sacks or potato bags or big large buckets in your garden to go along maybe the edge of your fence where they're out the way, you can grow potatoes throughout the year. Tomatoes are another good example. You can use the tomato grow bags. You can fit 2 to 3 in each one. They don't need any other pot. You can just place them onto the ground and then you can grow your tomatoes in there. Just make sure you use some canes to help support the tomato plant as it grows. Perennial fruits and vegetables. These will keep coming back year in, year out. Asparagus, rhubarb, fruit bushes. There's a whole range of different perennials that we can grow in the garden for food. Peas don't take up lots of room. If you just want to plant 4 or 5, you can plant them all in a very small area. But just remember, if you're growing anything in containers, make sure you keep up with the watering. Don't overwater And whatever container you use, make sure it has got really good drainage on it, because the last thing you want is for your tubs and baskets and things to be overly waterlogged. Making sure that when you're choosing what you want to grow, that the variety is suitable for your planting space. Growing something that's massive you might not be able to do, but there is plenty of dwarf varieties out there that take up very little room. You've got dwarf varieties of peas and beans that can be grown in a small space. You've got dwarf fruit trees. You've got all manner of different things. But bearing in mind when it comes to fruit trees and fruit bushes and things like that, and sometimes even the perennials, when you buy new, they will take 2 to 5 years to fully produce from that original seed or plant. So just bear that in mind. It may be a long-term plan to be able to grow some of these items. Once you start harvesting, what are you going to do with it? Is it something that's going to store well? Or is it something that needs to be kept in cold conditions? Do you have somewhere to do that? If you haven't got lots of space, your freezer is your best friend. There is lots of things that can be frozen. We deal with kilos and kilos of tomatoes every year, and some I put into the freezer whole and they're frozen solid, which I then take out and use in cooking at some point later on in the year. Sometimes I'll make sauces and dips and all manner of bits and pieces where I will safely make tomato sauces and chili sauces, etc., to have throughout the year. This is something that you'd actually like to see, how we store and prep a lot of our food that we produce. Liking and subscribing keep you up to date with any new videos on this. Google is your friend, guys. Research what you can do with some of these produce. There's some amazing things out there. So this year I'm going to do a mini series on different ways of growing in small areas. I'll be planting into buckets, tubs, baskets, straw bales, different ways that we can save on space and money. And in this mini series, I'll trial different ways of growing, and you'll be able to follow along and see how successful or unsuccessful it is.